It's the Happy Families podcast. It's the podcast for the time-poor parent who just wants answers now.
Saying to our kids, it's going to be okay, it doesn't actually reassure them because we don't know, and they know that we don't know. They know that we can't know.
And now here's the stars of our show, my mum and dad.
Right now, around the world, and particularly here in Australia, we're a long, long way away from a conflict that has escalated in a horrible, horrible way. But families and children in particular are concerned about what's happening between Russia and Ukraine. Today's podcast is aimed at helping you if your children have questions, or even if you have questions about how to respond, how to deal with, how to help to navigate this challenging situation. G'day, this is Dr. Justin Coulson. I'm the founder of happyfamilies.com.au. Kylie is my wife and mum to our 6 kids, and she's joining me for this conversation. It's everywhere, isn't it? The Russia-Ukraine conflict, the war that is escalating, and it's really concerning.
It's interesting. As a husband and wife, we have made a really conscious decision to keep the news out of our lounge room.
Right.
We don't even have the TV in our living space.
Yeah.
You know, it's downstairs in its own little pocket. And so I think that this has been a really important decision that we've made to help our children feel safe and secure in the life that we choose to live. Some would say that we're sheltering them and that we're actually creating naivety in some regards. But when you look at all of the things that we have no control over, this is one thing we can do on a daily basis to help our children feel calm, peaceful and secure in the environment that they're in.
Yeah.
So I don't actually know a lot about this story or what's going on. I'm obviously aware that there is a significant conflict happening between two countries. But other than that, this is something that I've kind of stayed clear of. So can you just explain what's really going on?
Before I do that, I just want to address the question of switching off. My advice consistently over the last 10, 15 years while I've been doing the work that I do has been keep your kids away from the news. I don't think that there's any strong argument to be made that it is in our children's best interest right now to be worried about a war on the other side of the world. Is it concerning? Yes. Should we have empathy and do everything we can to donate or to be useful in some way? Yeah, absolutely, of course. But in terms of raising our children's anxiety levels, especially after the last couple of years that they've had, they don't need the extra stress. They don't need the extra pressure of worrying about what might happen next. Research tells us really clearly that children need a predictable, secure life so that they can explore the world and respond with activity and enthusiasm and optimism about what's coming. That's what they need. Is it always true? Not necessarily. I mean, sometimes the world can be a dangerous, scary, horrible place, but our kids need to believe that it's those things, not dangerous and scary, safe and secure and predictable, so that they will explore, grow and branch out. So that's what I just want to highlight there. But as you said, little ears hear things. And big ears and big eyes, they're on TikTok now and they're on Instagram and they're seeing stuff that's coming.
Well, they have access to, it's not just the news now. It's not the news being on the living room. They've literally got access to information 24/7 at their fingertips in their bedrooms.
Yeah, and the stuff that they're seeing is pretty potentially graphic. Some of the things that are coming up on social media, it
won't be your typical newsworthy reports.
No, people are dying. People are being shot. There is bombing. I mean, this is the sort of stuff that can really undermine your faith in humanity and your belief that the world is safe. And our kids need to believe that humans are worth having faith in and that the world is actually safe. So you asked the question, what's actually going on? Guess what? For the most part, and please forgive my ignorance and my naivety, but I've got a psychology background. I've done 8.5 years, 9 years of study at university to get good at psychology, and I never actually took any subjects at all across my 9 years of tertiary education that helped me to understand Eastern European geopolitics. I know very, very little about the fall of the USSR. I know very, very little about Ukraine's desires to be part of the West rather than part of Russia. And I really don't understand why Putin has invaded and decided that he wants Ukraine to be part of Russia. Those things are beyond my knowledge. And I'd say, and I hope that
it's always about power.
Well, sure it is. But ultimately, I reckon that most Australian parents are in the same boat. Unless you're from the region, unless you've got family or friends there, or unless you've studied it specifically, you've probably picked up a few bits and pieces from being online and decided, there's a war going on. I wonder what's going on here. Maybe you've read a couple of articles. So you'll have a rudimentary knowledge. But the reality is most of us don't really know. So when the kids come to us and say, why is this happening? It can be hard to just dive in and say, well, let me tell you everything that I know. And you know what? I don't think that's what the kids actually want. They do want some facts, but I think that they're asking for some other reasons.
So what facts would you suggest that we share with our kids?
The basic ones. Like literally, there is a war going on. Russia has invaded Ukraine. Ukraine is a free, independent democracy. Russia is not. Russia is not that kind of place at all. And because that's happened, there's 44 million people who are now scared for their lives and for their freedom.
So I guess, when a child's coming to us and asking us these kinds of questions, knowing how children work more times than not, there's going to be a lot of whys.
Right.
Why is this happening? Is it going to get worse? Are there going to be more countries involved? Will it ever reach Australia?
Yeah. And the correct answer to that, and this is certainly the answer that I'll be giving our kids, is I don't know. Often as parents, we feel like we have to have all of the answers and we have to fix everything, but that's not helpful. The reality is we've got no control over what's going on. And again, for the most of us, until last week, how many of us really even knew where Ukraine was, knew that it bordered Russia, knew where this is all new information for many, many Australian parents. Again, some people will know a heck of a lot. Most of us, though, we don't know that much about it. So I think the kids need to know this. There's this war that Russia has invaded, that people will be hurt, that they'll be killed, that families will be broken up, that it's a devastating tragedy. And then we let them know that they're safe. We're here for them. And that's where we stop. We hug them. We let them know that we love them. And we don't try to fix it. We don't promise. We don't do anything except say, I'm here. It's really sad, isn't it? And I know that some people are going to be like, yeah, that's great, but that's not really enough. After the break, I'm going to tell you exactly why that's all we need to do.
It's the Happy Families Podcast.
Imagine a home where discipline got results without anyone having to feel bad or in trouble. The Do's and Don'ts of Discipline is a webinar to help parents set limits with love, compassion and humanity. Find it now at happyfamilies.com.au/shop.
It's the Happy Families Podcast, the podcast for the time poor parent who just wants answers now. Why shouldn't we be telling our kids that everything's going to be okay?
Well, I don't want to sound like I'm pessimistic. I don't know what's going to happen, but the reality is nobody knows what's going to happen. And so if we say it's going to be okay and it's not, we look foolish. We look like we have overpromised and underdelivered. I think as well, though, it doesn't actually offer reassurance. Like, let me choose another topic that's really, really hard to fathom. In fact, I'll give a couple of examples. Maybe you've just found out that you've got an aging parent or relative or a loved one who has an incurable disease and you've just gotten some bad news. Or when you think about the recent rains that have hit the East Coast so heavily, Brisbane, northern New South Wales and so on, and there's this fear that the rains are going to inundate the house and flood the suburb. When that's happening, when you're terrified that things are going to work out badly, and somebody sits beside you and says, don't worry about it. It's going to be okay. I'm sure everything's going to be just fine. Do you actually believe them? Does it make you feel comforted when they're saying it's going to be okay, when you know in your mind and in your heart that there's no idea, no one's got any idea whether it's going to be okay?
Usually it just makes me feel like they don't actually understand how I'm feeling.
Yeah, it actually feels dismissive. And the great irony is that the person who's saying it, whether it's you as a parent saying it to your kids or whether it's a good friend or loved one saying it to you about what you're afraid of, the intention there is so good. It's meant to be reassuring. It's meant to be kind. It's meant to be helpful. It's going to be okay. Don't worry about a thing. We've got this. And in your heart, you're going, but I'm terrified and I am worried. And how do you know that we've got this? Somebody may die here or we may get flooded or insert your preferred tragedy based on the news of the day. So when it comes to whether it's floods or whether it comes to the war between Russia and Ukraine, saying to our kids, it's going to be okay, it doesn't actually reassure them because we don't know and they know that we don't know. They know that we can't know.
So what do you actually do when you've got a real worrier, when you've had those conversations with them, you've let them know that you don't have all the answers, that you can't promise that it's going to be okay, but that you're there for them, and that's not enough? These little worriers, they just ruminate over the information that they have, and it just builds up into this big black monster inside their heads.
Yeah, what an important question, Kylie. I think there's a handful of things that we can do. The first is to recognise that and talk to the kids about this, there are some things that you worry about that you just can't fix. So a war on the other side of the world is one of those things, and worrying about it doesn't make any difference. But there are certain things that you can do. You can watch the news and get the good news stories. Look at the people who are being brave. I loved that incredible story about the Russian tennis player who, I mean, talk about risking your life. Talk about somebody with moral conviction and courage, somebody who's done something that I'm going to say is absolutely incredible, remarkable. Russian tennis player, his name is Andrei Rublev. And at the end of a recent tennis match, he walked up to the camera and he said, "No war, please." He actually wrote "No war, please" on the camera with one of those texters that they write on the camera with. I mean, this guy's Russian. I reckon that's a brave thing to do. There are some people in Russia who may now have horrible motives for him. What a brave thing to do. Look for the good news. Look for the good people. I reckon there's a lot of Russians that don't like this. And there's a lot of Ukrainians who are being brave beyond words. And when you share that stuff with your worrying kids, they see that there is nuance and there are people who are trying to help. Fred Rogers used to say, look for the helpers. And I think that's great news. The other thing, though, is talk to your kids about what you can control and what you can't. So there are things that are going on here that they can control, like whether they're exercising, whether they're sleeping, whether they're communicating, whether they're with their friends, whether they're doing the things that they know lean into or lead to well-being. And there are things that don't. So it's about controlling what you can control and having strategies to work through things when there is stuff going on that you can't control. I mean, we've got an entire webinar in the Happy Families shop all about anxiety and how parents can help their kids to navigate that. And we could talk about this conversation for a very, very long time, but there's just a couple of short ideas that might be helpful.
So if we were to recap this conversation, what would be your top 3 tips for parents?
Yeah, number 1, to the extent that you can, keep the kids away from this news. It's not helpful. It won't be helpful to them at all if they're exposed to it. Number 2, give them what facts you know briefly, recognizing that they're probably not after too many facts. They're probably after some level of reassurance and understanding. And so therefore, number 3 is don't try to fix it because you can't. It's out of your control. But instead, be with them and just let them know you know it's hard and that you're there and that you love them and you'll do everything you can to keep them safe. Those 3 things are probably the 3 most important things that we can do as families, as parents, to help our kids feel safe in these conditions. And just quickly, 2 big interviews over the next couple of days with more really important stuff to help your family to function better. First off, tomorrow, Australia's eSafety Commissioner, Julie Inman-Grant, talking to us about keeping our kids safe online. And then on Thursday, the conversation that every parent needs to hear about vaccinating kids aged 5 to 11. We're going to have a conversation with Professor McMillan from the Federal Government's Department of Health, and I'm going to ask the hard questions about why or why not this vaccine does or doesn't matter for our kids. Really hope that this has been a helpful conversation. The Happy Families podcast is produced and put together by Justin Rullon from Bridge Media and Craig Bruce, our executive producer. As always, if you'd like more info about making your family happier, you can get it at happyfamilies.com.au.